So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Aleksanteri Fellowship Seminar. I'm Maryna Shevtsova. I'm Professor of Russian Law here at the University of Helsinki. My field is gender studies, human rights of women, LGBTQI people, and it's my pleasure to host Maryna Shevtsova, who is a Ukrainian political scientist and LGBTQI rights activist. She currently is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Ljubljana, Slovenia, and a senior FWFO fellow at Q11, which you're going to move next year, right? So after finishing her PhD dissertation on the LGBTQI movements in Turkey and Ukraine at Humboldt University, Berlin, Maryna was a Fulbright scholar at the University of Florida and a Swedish Institute fellow at Lund University. She also had numerous visiting positions, including such countries as Turkey, and because her research obviously covers Turkey as well. Maryna is a co-founder of Equal Opportunities Platform, a Dnipro-based LGBTQI organization that works with parents of LGBTQI people and promotes gender equality. And in 2022, just this year, Maryna joined the board of @Gender European Feminist Research Network. It is very exciting that Maryna's book, which is titled LGBTQI Politics and Value Change in Ukraine and Turkey, Exploring Europe, ? Was published and they're available for everyone from Routledge. And I checked today, so we can also do that through Invested Helsinki ebook access. So if anybody interested, please go to Helka and check the online copy. Maryna has published numerously, and today's talk also is based on one of her publications as well as on new data, and it's one of the cases that is from a bigger project that she's been looking at, Aleksanteri Institute. So the talk the title of the talk is on the slide, and I'm going to sit down and not feature in front of the nice slides. Just before we go into the talk, a bit of a housekeeping, as we are in hybrid format. Those of you who are here, that is great. So we'll have Q&A in a normal way, and the recording will stop before Q&A. So the Q&A the session is not going to be recorded. So that's for you to remember. And those of you who are online, please use chat to leave your comments and to ask your questions. I will be monitoring the chat and all the questions will be transferred to Maryna. So if you don't want your comment to be public, available to everyone, send your comment to me directly in chat. All right? So these are, as for the housekeeping, because we have too many people today, and we unfortunately can't, just technically, it's not going to be possible to listen or to hear what everyone has to say. We'll save the chat, and if everybody agrees, the chat will go to Maryna, because obviously that's part of the research. But then if everybody agrees, then we can also share chat afterwards. All right, without further ado, Maryna, please.
Good. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here today, and also thank you to those who are listening to us online. And special thanks to Aleksanteri Institute, Helsinki University for hosting me, and Professor Maryna Shevtsova for agreeing to be my academic mentor and discussant today. I was actually thinking about this presentation and changing it a lot in my mind, and also then in PPT, because I didn't know what kind of audience I will have. So in the end, maybe the description was a little bit, as usual, description might have been a little bit decisive, because now I try to make it more interesting for a broader audience, because I mentioned that you probably are interested in Ukraine and in LGBTQ rights in Ukraine and the resistances against gender and sexual equalities in Ukraine. So that's what I will be talking about. And here is, here is the teaser for today. So I will start with telling you why do I care about anti-gender campaigns, about anti-gender movements in Ukraine, and to get you more familiar with myself, I will tell some personal anecdote. Then I will try to convince you that we all should care somehow about anti-gender movements, because this is a global phenomenon and it's not going anywhere. It is here to stay so far. And then I will introduce you my case, which is Ukraine. And I have to say that this is a part of a larger research project that is a 5-year research project that covers not only Ukraine, but also Georgia and Moldova. But today We are in Ukraine only, and of course I will be talking about Ukraine before the large-scale invasion, because now the situation changed a lot. But if you have some questions about what is going on now, I will be also happy to address that later. A little bit, it will not be loaded theoretically. I will just introduce some concepts that I'm using, and I will explain why I use that one and not the other one. And two narrower cases of all this large project that I will be talking about. So one is LGBTQ activism as a response. So I will basically argue that the LGBTQ activism in Ukraine and the way it is developing now and the strategies that LGBTQ activists are choosing, they are kind of reaction to the actions of anti-gender campaigns in the country. And then I will talk about religion and about the role of the Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations in opposing promotion of gender and sexual equalities in the country. And then to wrap it up, I will discuss like challenges and the potential for future research for myself and for my colleagues. So as I promised, I will start with a personal anecdote, which might not be that funny, but it's very illustrative. So it started with my self-promotion with my PhD research, which was on LGBTQ activism. And it was a qualitative research. So I did it from 2013 to 2017. And during this process, I got a lot of friends, and I became familiar with the LGBTQ activism in Turkey and Ukraine. I took more than 8 interviews. There was a lot of participant observation, volunteering, and somehow I ended up, there was a side project with Rajana Bulantuyeva, who is coming next week. We did this edited volume on LGBTQ activism in Central Eastern Europe. And I couldn't help it. I ended up being involved with an NGO, Tergo, that is an NGO that works with, it used to work only with parents of LGBTQ people, but now we expanded our activities and we started to work with schools and psychologists and educators. So what I have been doing parallel to my scholarly work, I was doing trainings for educators in schools, sometimes in schools, and sometimes we would take teachers and take them to a nice seminar room, and the whole day we would be speaking to them about sexual orientation, gender identity, why you shouldn't bully students who seem different from the others, and so on. And so it was also nice, but what happened in March 2018, it kind of brought my attention to the topic. So we were in Poltava. Poltava is a city in central Ukraine. Or, yeah, you can say central. And this is a very nice city. We had this hotel conference room for 20 psychologists, so women in their late 40s, early 50s. And then the second day of the training, luckily it was the early morning, so there was only my colleague, who is a mother of a gay son, she's 50, me and 2 young women who helped us with the logistics. And so the doors open and 20 young men wearing these dark clothes, balaclavas, masks, and it was pre-COVID, so it was quite unusual. They enter the room and they just start turning everything upside down. They didn't do harm to us because they saw that, they only have 4 or 3 women in front of them. But the interesting thing was that they came very brave, and they said that they came to disrupt gay parade. So they were like, yeah, where is this gay parade? We will hit all those gays. And then they see us. So apparently they got some fake clue. But anyway, so they didn't stop on that because they already came. And as you see, there is a guy with the camera. This guy had a microphone. There was a flag behind him, and he was starting, they made a video saying that we, national course organization, we came to free Ukraine from this threat to national security, LGBT people, and we will clean Ukraine from these perverts, and so on and so that classical text. So of course, when we were there, and then the police came, and it was another story how police reacts to such things. But of course, after a couple of days, when the first shock went away, I started thinking about this and how it was, and I remember that it was extremely performative, and also the videos that they created. So you should have seen it. It's online still. They men with patriotic music. They gather next to the monument to some Ukrainian writer, and then they march to free Ukraine. Then unfortunately they see just elderly women. So of course they got a lot of backlash in the social media. There was a lot of criticism from right-wing political parties who were like, no, we don't want to do anything with them. But basically, I was thinking, okay, that this doesn't look like something natural. This looks like something very staged. And I wanted to know more about this. And it was, 2018 was already a time when there was a lot of talk about Ukrainian right-wing groups, radicals, fascists, and so on. So, and somehow it, I'm just keeping time here. Also, somehow it was, all this notion that the biggest threats to human rights in Ukraine are radical right-wing populists. So I went first to the scholarly literature, and without surprise, I discovered that, of course, similar things are happening in some countries in the neighborhood. So if you look at Poland, Bulgaria, also until a certain point, Slovenia, Romania, you see the same, and this is not surprising, right? Then what is surprising to me is that if you look at the countries like Sweden, like Finland, the UK, Canada, the USA, you also see a lot of resistances to what we could call achievements or progress or advancements for sexual and gender equality. So this is something that is not unique for, backward, underdeveloped Central Eastern Europe, but this is rather a global phenomenon. If you look then at Latin America, you will also see a lot of anti-gender movements there. And of course, they all take very different forms. So you have some very, so to say, civilized and, events very well paid, funded, like this World Congress of Families, for example. Or you have the festivals for family in different cities. You have now these educational videos, you have books, booklets, and everything. Or sometimes you have this popular street activism, like on the other picture from Krakow, where there are some posters. Sometimes you can see that, again, these posters were printed by someone somewhere and distributed. Sometimes they are actually handmade, and I'm sure that many people come also because they do support this cause to stop gender threat. And sometimes it gets like really aggressive, and Ukraine is not an exception. You have these small but very aggressive groups of allegedly nationalists who, they claim that they protect children. They protect children, and they protect the country and the nation from dying out. So now, before moving into the case of Ukraine more specifically, I just wanted to clarify some terminologies that I'm using, not only here today, but also through my works. So there are two better known terms, actually. So one is anti-gender movements or anti-gender campaigns. And I also will probably use it a lot today because it's people are more familiar with it, but also it's like very broad. It became popular with the book by Roman Kuchar, my supervisor in University of Ljubljana, and David Paternot from Free University Brussels. And basically, it's another edited volume where a lot of authors write about such movements in different countries in different parts of the world. And if we look at what they define as anti-gender movement, you see that this is a very broad variety of social movements that use different tactics, but what kind of unites them all is that they use the terms as something negative, gender ideology, genderist, genderism, and also they then attack such things that we could probably move them call them morality politics issues. So rights of LGBTQ people, adoption, sexual reproductive rights, sexual orientation, gender identity, and so on, abortion, sex work. And then, of course, a very important thing is that you see a lot of commonalities, and with every year we see more and more commonalities because they kind of inspire each other. They also interact. They invite each other for their conferences, for their events. They network, but at the same time, and what is interesting is, of course, all these movements are rooted geographically, geopolitically, culturally. They have historical context that kind of shapes the way how they structure their activism. And then two other terms. So one of them, and I will use them also today in the presentation to make a difference between two cases I will be addressing, are political homophobia and heteroactivism. Political homophobia, I think, is a more famous term. It was offered by Weiss and Bosia in 2013, again, an edited volume. And basically, they refer to political homophobia to define the state strategy. So a very good example, not to go into long definition, but for example, Russia and the law, like one of the examples would be the law to ban the propaganda of same-sex relationship to minors. But basically, whatever policy at the state level or the level of major political actors in the country is used, a homophobic strategy to, to choose another, and this other would be one to blame and scapegoat for all the problems, that the state may have, or to put them in the center of public attention, to distract the attention from other issues, or to gain popular vote. So this is something that is political homophobia. And I will give some cases of political homophobia in Ukraine today. And the other term, for which, and this is a debate I usually have with the reviewers of my papers, heteroactivism. So heteroactivism is a newer term, a little bit newer. It's coined by Brown and Nash, and they refer to, with heteroactivism, to actually grassroots activism or different kinds of social movements which are not necessarily at the state level. So they are not supported by the state. They do not reflect the mainstream or the main position of the state, but rather they're united ideologically. And then, of course, we can debate whether their ideology is something they believe in, or, again, like a strategic choice. But basically, the center of their movement, their goal is to promote heterosexual family as the only type of family, or heterosexual union, monogamous union, is the only one accepted by the state and the one that deserves to be protected and to survive, again, for the sake of the nation, right, of the health of the nation, security of the nation, and so on. And so I will be talking today, so I make this division, or I differentiate for the case of Ukraine, and I'm sure it can be done for all other countries, heteroactivism, heteroactivist actors, and political homophobia. And what I will probably try to show today is that heteroactivism, which is much more visible and much more discussed, and especially, and we'll probably have to say thank you Russian propaganda for that, it's much less dangerous for LGBT rights in Ukraine than hidden political homophobia. So now moving to the case of Ukraine. What is so special about the case of Ukraine? Well, one thing is that in Ukraine, something that is framed very much as clash of values is rather geopolitical clash than societal. And now what the last surveys are actually showing, and on which I'm standing, is that there is not that much societal homophobia as it is being claimed, but there is a lot of this geopolitical competition between, well, one neighbor, Russia, that is promoting or presenting itself as a defender of traditional family values and so on. And then there is Europe, which again presents itself as the liberal and gay-friendly, which, as we well know, not always is the case. This picture, I like it very much because, I mean, it illustrates it all. This is from 2013, and these are the light boxes that were distributed. They were put on all the major streets of big cities in Ukraine to warn people that association with the EU means same-sex marriages. And ironically, the group that did this, they call themselves Ukrainian Choice, Ukrainski Вибір, but this group was led by Medvedchuk, who is a close friend of Putin, and it was a very pro-Russian group. So they also had other light boxes, but they were actually less popular and less attracting attention. There was something like small pensions and for population, but this major one was homosexualization of Ukraine. Another thing to know about Ukraine, and also about the region probably, and this is argued now also by colleagues from Poland, is that when we talk about backlash in some countries, we talk about backlash in relation to these anti-gender movements. Backlash comes when there is some progress. In case of Ukraine, the resistance came before the progress. So when this started, this discussion of same-sex marriages that can be imposed on Ukraine, that the EU homosexualizes the country, there was no visible LGBTQ movement. So to find them, you had to really dig deep. And you have to know people, and there was I did the content analysis of Ukrainian media. There were no articles about LGBTQ, maybe like about Elton John or something like this. So, and then my bigger argument is that actually in Ukraine, what's going on, what has been going on until now, still LGBTQ activism was always in response to these resistances. An interesting thing is that, ironically, all the achievements that we have made are somehow related to these resistances, which is not to say that we have to say thank you to those people, but this is still an interesting tendency to observe and to pay attention to. And then, of course, another thing I always try to pay attention to bring attention of the audience to it is overrated significance of radical right-wing movements. Yes, they are there, they are visible, but they do very little to really harm the progress with LGBTQ equality. So first sub-case within the case of Ukraine, this is the, well, and I called it who is opposing gender and sexual equality in Ukraine, and this is what I call heteroactivists. So first, we have these radical right-wing groups, but then we have to be very clear what are those. And those are not the parties in the parliament. So Ukrainian parliament, doesn't have radical right-wing groups, radical right-wing parties. They never managed to pass this 5% threshold. And then the groups who are really, really aggressive, and those who come with these posters like Kyiv against feminism for family, tradition, and order, they are visible only when there are, I don't know, March for Women's Rights on 8th of March, when there is one small conference, and especially if it is somehow close to the elections. Then they show up, they are very loud, they will make a mess, they will destroy things, and then they disappear until the next time. So they don't have proper agenda there. So we do have also, of course, nationalist parties, but they usually try to distance themselves from this hooligan violence because it is not supported by the public. Also, when I did interviews, I will not subscribe and I will not sign under these words now, but when these groups were active in 2015-16, and I interviewed some of their leaders and participants, well, they were Russians, and they were Russians with Russian passports. So this is another thing. You have these nationalists who don't speak Ukrainian and who don't have Ukrainian passports. So that is something to tell you how big the threat of these groups to LGBTQ movement. But for the security of individuals, of course, it is the threat because they come, they beat people up. Sometimes it is even used, and this is again not to say thank you to them, but sometimes it can be even used to ask for new funding. You know, we say, look, we have these aggressive people because donors cynically are more eager to support you if you say this, show these hooligans rather than you show the teachers who learned, I don't know, what is homosexuality and that it is normal. It is not that impressive, but if you show violence, so there is some use of them. And then there is another group of these heteroactivists, which are funded by another major state, by the US, and these are American Protestants, but rather these religious sects. They were the first ones actually to protest against homosexuality in Ukraine. There was organization Любовь против гомосексуализма, Love Against Homosexuality, but they used like this pejorative form of homosexualism. And they are not big, but they are very persistent. Now they changed, they branded, now they call themselves All Together for the Family, and they do family festivals. They do festival Mother, Father, Me, Happy Family, so this kind of stuff. But they don't have, so they have their audience, they do have their supporters, but they're very very safe in the sense that they don't do harm, they don't have active lobby in the parliament, but they're there. And so on this, I wanted to build around them, I wanted to build my arguments about these frames and counter frames used by these very vocal actors, heteroactivist actors, and then how LGBTQ activists reacted to that. And there are three periods or three moments in the story of LGBTQ movement development in Ukraine, and these are not the only stories that can be told, but they are the most illustrative ones. So first one, I already showed you this poster with association with the EU means same-sex marriages. And this is also this caricature, Ukrainians for the European values. You know, you see what is the message. So the term Gayropa coming from Russia, gay plus Europa. So good thing what happened when we had the Euromaidan in 2013-14, and there was this clear association with this kind of thinking with Russia and with Russian interference into Ukrainian politics. A lot of people actually started to appreciate European values more, even without knowing what European values mean. So people were like, okay, you have two sides to choose because the country is too unstable to be on their own. And then LGBTQ people will actually use the point of European values to lobby for changes in legislation, to lobby for allow them to have March of Equality on Krещатик, which is the main street of Kiev, and so on. And it worked. It worked to a certain extent. For example, the best example of this is that in 2015, actually, in Ukraine, there was adopted an amendment to the labor code, which banned discrimination of LGBTQ people at work. And this is the only reason why it was adopted. It was because there was Brussels who was saying you have to do that. And there was visa-free regime offered, and there were activists with flags and together with European diplomats. So there was, if I'm not mistaken, the voting for the law, it took place 6 times in one day, which is actually illegal. So it shouldn't be like this. It should be like if they don't want to vote for it, they should leave. It should be discussed, changed. But no, the speaker was, and it's a public story. The speaker was, no, we are not leaving anywhere. We have to pass the law because Brussels is waiting. So a European argument actually worked. It also showed how much our MPs, in fact, care about family values. Another very good case is with LGBTQ military and veterans, and this is interestingly again something we are grateful to right-wing groups, because in 2015 the March of Equality in Kiev was banned, and it was banned because there were letters of protest. We have war in the country. We shouldn't have pride. And the argument that our leaders of some nationalist groups used was, you should send all these men to the army. They should go and fight. Not to mention, of course, that they themselves did not fight. They preferred to beat young boys on the streets. But as a reaction to that, actually, first there was the exhibition, first with closed faces, where people were saying, I'm a lesbian, or I'm a trans person, I'm a gay, and I am in the army now. I'm a veteran. I was there last year, or I lost part of my body. So it started with this exhibition. We also were here, and then it went on with coming outs. So first, Viktor Filipenko, probably the most famous our gay soldier in Ukraine. He came out first, and then Nastya Konfederat, a lesbian soldier, also. They too were given a lot of interviews. They founded the organization of LGBTQ soldiers and veterans, and it actually had a very good effect. And now it actually gives even better effect in the conditions of war, because now many of them went back to the army, and many more people started doing coming out because they know that they might die tomorrow, and they don't want to hide. So you can see there is a group of LGBTQ military and veterans on Facebook. It's open, and every week there is 1 or 2 stories with photos. People say, okay, let's say I'm Ivan, and I'm in the military, and I'm gay. I have my boyfriend. We cannot be married. It might happen that I die tomorrow, and my partner cannot come to funeral and say that he is my partner. So this actually changed a lot the societal attitudes. And we had last month or 2 months ago the petition signed by 25,000 signatures. This is what is needed for president to address the petition to legalize same-sex marriages in Ukraine. I don't believe that it will, happen soon. The president said we will consider this, but this is a big change for a country where it was something, unspeakable of. And then the third case is the educational case, which might be not that fancy, but also very efficient. So there was another thing. So one of the main arguments is that we are doing propaganda, we are doing back to children. So now actually Ukrainian heteroactivists, they change their rhetoric. So they don't say anymore that homosexuality is the disease. They don't say that you can cure it. They don't say even that this is though they became kind of careful with terms, but now they say, but leave children alone. Leave children alone, children cannot see that. So what has been done, and I think this was a very good thing that we did, and we continue. We did the survey of schools, and we showed that actually we have thousands of LGBTQ teenagers at schools, and these children are being bullied, they are being violated, they face various kind of discrimination, they feel depressive, they have depressive thoughts, they think about suicide. And the first time in 2017, it didn't work that efficient, but in 2020, together with the law against bullying, somehow it actually brought very good fruits. And we received official approval of the Ministry of Education to train our teachers to be tolerant and to be inclusive, and how to work with LGBTQ children and with their parents. And we even managed to have open posters in one of the cities saying like your student is gay, or like, but student like from school, different word, you're учень, gay or lesbian or trans, you can go and have our online course for free. You can participate in our trainings, which of course is pretty much not liked by many groups, but you know, this is the example of how you can react, how it strategically with counter frame LGBTQ movement reacted to the initial frame, the resistance frame. Now to a bit sadder thing, but still I think there is a room for hope, who are creating real obstacles for gender and sexual equality in Ukraine. So as I was saying, in my mind, both as a scholar and as an activist, I think those groups are really helping us more than not. But there are two real threats, and one threat is the Council of Churches and Religious Organizations of Ukraine. And this is the organization, they are registered as an NGO, and they bring together all the religious leaders of Ukraine. And of course, they have a lot of money. They also have their people in the parliament. They are there when there is any discussion of any law. Even so, again, according to the procedure, you have to have the discussion and invite everyone, including civil society. But then somehow this part of civil society is included, and the real activists and experts are not invited, or they learned about it like 5 minutes before the discussion. So it's like constructed this way. And this Council of Churches, they are very powerful in the sense that they condemn violence, so they don't say that you should beat LGBT people. They are very careful with expressions, but they managed, for example, until 2022 to stop ratification of Istanbul Convention. So it happened though. That's why I'm saying that there is a room for improvement, because once, but we had a really big threat of Russian tanks in the country too, and this is actually a very it's a phrase from 2015 when we adopted when Ukraine adopted the amendment to labor code. Our spokesperson for the then biggest party, he said it's better to have gay parades in Kiev than Russian tanks. So now the same, like it's better to ratify Istanbul Convention than have Russian tanks in Ukraine. And well, it is a very questionable argument, of course, but I'm trying to find some positive things in what's going on. So this is one group, and I will go back to them on the next slide. And another group are politicians, and that's what I also call political homophobia, but they are populist in their anti-gender claims. So Yulia Tymoshenko, you probably know her, she's been this notorious figure. She never cared about gender, she never cared about homosexuality, she never cared about all these things. Now when her popularity started fading away, now she came up. So this is the video she did for Istanbul Convention ratification against it. And here it says the threat of gender. And all her party didn't vote for Istanbul Convention because she says like this is bringing third gender to schools, our children will be perverts, they will be confused, they will all become transgender. And the whole and Yulia, she can speak very well, so very like emotionally, this mother of Ukraine who protects our children, she cares so much about them. So I think these two groups are, and there are politicians like her who use the issue. They don't care about LGBTQ people at all, but they use the issue to gain popularity. Now, to like already going to the end, just a couple of words about Ukrainian Orthodox Church and why I think this is an interesting group with a potential. So on the one hand, they use these frames, the mobilization frames that they use to mobilize their supporters, and church remains in Ukraine, surprisingly. I didn't know that until I looked up the data, because I thought, oh, I don't have any believers around me. The church is the most trusted institution in Ukraine. Which is, I don't know, but they remain the most trusted institution. More, of course, Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So not because we have the Moscow Patriarchate, which is still there, but now Ukrainian, like Kiev Patriarchate, Orthodox Church is still extremely popular. And so now they change the rhetoric. So they don't speak that much about the sin as such or perversion, but they speak about the rights of believers. The rights of believers are under the threat. So what if now these people who promote homosexuality, they will somehow discriminate the believers? What if you as a Christian will not be able to study at school because it will make you learn about homosexuality as something normal? Then they also, of course, talk about this protecting minors, protecting family, because homosexual people do not have families. And then also what on which the Ukrainian church is playing is that religion now is a part of national identity. So this is something that makes you different again from Russia, because that's now Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And so one part of people, of course, who are supporting it is because also church supported actively the resistance. Ukrainian church supported Euromaidan. So they gained those hesitant people who are like, they don't know yet whether they support or not. They're not sure about this LGBTQ. Those can easily be gained by their line of arguing. So, and now this my ray of hope. I think that in the current conditions, what we are seeing, and it's also the case of Georgia, but in Ukraine more, because Ukraine now is in the middle of large war, that the church has to kind of adapt to new reality. And new reality is European. So, like for now, Ukraine, the only Ukrainian choice is to Westernize, and dependency on the West is very big. And we saw it with the Istanbul Convention. That nobody wants. We have 450 MPs in the parliament, 300 plus are members of the faction for the family values. Nobody wanted even to discuss Istanbul Convention last year, and this year they all voted like this. It was like, yes, only Yulia Tymoshenko and party and some others, but the majority, they just changed their opinion like this, because we need weapons, we need the candidacy, and we need money. So this shows that actually neither, well, I was saying that our societal homophobia is not that big, but also shows that our politicians are not that afraid anymore of supporting things like this, especially if they see the clear award at stake. And then what the church is now trying to do, they are trying to negotiate this alternative Europeanization. They say, well, maybe we can Europeanize, but with exception. Maybe we can have Istanbul Convention without word gender. Maybe we can, make this LGBT march somewhere, but hidden. But I think that there is now this momentum which potentially can be used, and there is now a small room for dialogue with some church representatives that can be used. And now moving to, that's my last slide for the challenges and directions for the research. So one thing, of course, and I'm open to talk about this in the discussion part, that full-scale war in Ukraine is now, now for more than half a year. What we can see on the one hand, of course, as usual, wars kind of cement traditional gender roles, but we also see that it's not always the case of Ukraine. We see 15% of our army are women. We have LGBTQ soldiers and veterans. We have LGBTQ activists sending goods to the military and military accepting it from LGBTQ organizations. So maybe there is some changes are possible. And also, of course, again, we have these refugees and displaced people who went to Europe and see kind of different attitudes again. Children who went to schools now in schools where the different things are being taught. So I see some potential there. But what of course is dangerous or scary is now what's going on with these other countries which are in solidarity with Ukraine, like Poland or like Romania. Also, well, Hungary probably is not the best case. I don't think Ukraine will side with Hungary, but Poland is a very dangerous case in the sense that Poland is this alternative Europeanization. Our politicians and church leaders refer to, they say, well, look, you can be a European country, you can be a member of the EU, but still have LGBTQ-free zones, you can ban abortion, so we should be like Poland. At the same time, I think, I'll just move to this last slide to show you, so Ukrainian Kiev Pride and Ukraine Pride and many Ukrainian activists were at many prides across Europe this year. And also, of course, it was used to advocate to supply Ukraine with weapons and so on. And Warsaw actually hosted the very big Pride parade, even though the ruling party is extremely homophobic. But it was, I was there, it was very peaceful. There were no attacks. It was in the center, it lasted like 3 or 4 hours. So I think there is now this moment when it can go both ways. And this is a big question where it will go. And I don't exaggerate our parts in this, right? Very small room, small group of people. But I do think that now it's time for each of us to try to push it in the direction we want it to be pushed. And on this, I'll stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.